Ready? Okay, so hello and welcome everybody. Welcome to the PBAS monthly program for this month. My name is Sonia. I'm the Associate Director of Education with PBAS. And before I introduce Kevin and his talk and we get the party started with the box turtles, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's been going on at PBS recently and what are some of the things that are coming up. So first of all, less than a month ago, our new AmeriCorps team joined us. So these are the folks that are making the magic happen with our education programs. So Charlotte, Liz, Sam, and Will, they're not here in person tonight because they had a very busy day training for our watershed field trips, which are beginning on Friday. And they are doing awesome. We Naturalists has been going on. So you can see some of the kiddos here having fun on one of the pawpaw days. They're gathering pawpaws, learning about some pollination and the life cycle with some of the critters that live with pawpaws. The fourth grade watershed program, really big part of PBS education programs, managed and organized by Laurel. Here who does a fantastic job with it. And it's huge. We serve all of the fourth grade public school classrooms in Berkeley, Jefferson, and Morgan counties. So those AmeriCorps environmental educators have been busy and they're going to be busy. So this Friday is that first field trip coming up. This is an older photo from previous years since we're just getting that started for right now, but we're really excited to be doing stuff like investigating the macroinvertebrates in the streams with the kick nets, as is shown in that photo. But in between all the watershed programs, our educators are busy with other school programs. In the bottom left, you can see Sam, one of our new educators this year, and we've been getting such lovely feedback from teachers, and I wanted to share. So one of the teachers was just saying, thank you so much for this experience. How much the students look forward to it, and how our educators not only help the youth get more knowledge, but also feel knowledgeable in the process. So they're just doing such a beautiful job with building on what students already know, validating that, and giving them to learn more and learn deeper. And that thank you extends not just to them, but to all people that support PBS, because you are all supporting them as well. So thank you. We started up some fall volunteer work days at Cool Spring. A volunteer named Bob Shorts, who is a forester and restoration ecologist, has been leading these. There's been one so far. You can see the smiles there of the folks that turned up, some of them in this room, and there's more along the way. And so this is a great series of work days that are helping to restore some of the areas at Cool Spring, pulling out invasives, having a lot of fun. But also learning a lot too, because Bob is just a wealth of knowledge. So if you're interested in getting some physical activity in and learning and just having fun with a great crew, I highly encourage you to come out for one of these. The next one is coming right up, October 15th. So that is this Sunday. And there's more along the way. So I'm going to tell you a few of the things really just within the next week, because I'm not going to talk about the whole month of October going into November. But going back to this Saturday, there's a drawing, sketching, and painting nature workshop happening at Cool Spring. The weather is supposed to be rainy, but it's going to be indoors. So this is a workshop that this time is going to focus on techniques with pen and ink, and beginners are welcome. So if you have any interest in learning about art, learning the techniques and practicing it with like-minded and welcoming individuals, this is a good opportunity for you. Next week, we have a wellness walk at Blandy Farms Ginkgo Grove, and the colors are supposed to be spectacular. So this is a great just walk in the woods with some great folks. Next week, we also have bird walk at Cool Spring Preserve. So the third Wednesday, led by Beth Poole, always a nice time. And next week, there's also a field trip for the Pages and Pathways book group. So the field trip is going to be at Eidolon Preserve, one of the PVAS preserves that we manage. And the book was written about Eidolon. So everybody needs a mountain Books are available to borrow at Cool Spring Preserve, so you can stop by, call if you're worried, but we still have plenty of copies. And I will say too that I think it would just be fine if you wanted to come to the field trip first and then borrow a book. So whichever way you want to do it, it should be. We have some volunteer opportunities coming up. We're always happy to have more hands at our education programs to just make a better supported and richer experience for the students that are there. People that can just enthuse about being in nature and can have extra knowledge to boot, that is great. So fourth grade watershed field trips, Laurel is the person to talk to about that. Trail of Bones coming up. That's a really fun event where there are bones of animals on our trail, lights, people come and explore the trail, explore the bones, learn some things, and just have that like fun vibe, like lights at night trail. And finally, turtle time on November 3rd. I'm especially looking for volunteers for this because most of our educators are really busy with that stuff that I told you about with these field trips. This is a public open day where people can come and meet our turtle ambassadors, like Scoot the box turtle. That's Willow the wood turtle you see right there. Okay, and then just jumping ahead to next month, I'm actually going to be giving the talk next month, and it's about a topic that doesn't have anything to do with this region of the world, but it is something that I happen to know a lot about. My educational background and my work background for over the past decade was in volcanology, volcanoes. So I'm just going to share some of that with you all. So same place here at Hospice next month. Okay, with that, I would like to introduce you to tonight's speaker and get this party started. So this is Kevin. And Kevin Oxenrider is the Amphibian and Reptile Program Leader with the West Virginia Division of Natural Resources. Kevin oversees conservation, management, and research actions for West Virginia's diverse amphibians and reptiles statewide, and represents West Virginia on regional, national, and international working groups and committees to collaborate on amphibian and reptile conservation. He serves as a leading partner on the Eastern Box Turtle Working Group and has been an integral part of developing range-wide conservation actions for box turtles. So without further ado, welcome, Kevin. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. All right. I think I can figure this out. Is there a pointer button? Is that this one?
Oh, I actually don't know if there's a pointer button.
Nope. Nope. That was not it. I found the pointer button though. All right. Always something. Sorry, folks. All right. Make sure we're all connected. We're good. All right. So as said, my name is Kevin Oxenrider. I'm with the West Virginia Division of Natural Resources. We're going to get back to that. There we go. And today we're going to talk about unboxing the conservation and management of West Virginia's box turtles. And so I just kind of want to start off this whole thing with saying this whole presentation is for all of you. So if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to stop me, ask me those. I know that there are people on Zoom watching this. If you have a question, just drop it in the chat. And I'm sure that we can get that question answered. I'm happy to answer anything that anybody has as we go through it. And if I'm just talking too quickly, I get really excited about talking about turtles. And sometimes I start to talk really quickly. If you need me to slow down, feel free to ask me to do that too. I'm happy to do that. But the objectives for this conversation today that we're going to be having, we're going to go over some general biology and ecology of box turtles. And we're going to get a better understanding of the distribution of box turtles, not only here in West Virginia, but looking at box turtles distributed across North America, or at least the United States. We're going to discuss threats currently impacting box turtle populations. And we're going to take a look at an emphasis on the illegal collection, because this is something that is often overlooked. And people don't quite understand how severe and serious this threat is to not only box turtles, but all of our wild turtles, and in reality, all of our amphibians and reptiles here in West Virginia. And I should say in North America too. And lastly, we're going to describe recent and ongoing research and conservation initiatives that are in place to promote box turtle conservation here in West Virginia. So we're going to jump right into it, and we're going to start talking about general biology, general ecology of box turtles, just so that you have an understanding as we go into talking about some of these threats and some of these projects that are going on. Having a good background is good to understand the rest of what we're going to be talking about today. So the woodland box turtle, or Terrapene carolina, this is the species, or should say the subspecies of box turtle that we have here in West Virginia. Some people probably have heard of it as being called the eastern box turtle, but the eastern box turtle has now been split into 4 different subspecies. And so the one that we have here in West Virginia is the woodland box turtle, or the Terrapene carolina you see up there. It is West Virginia's only terrestrial turtle species that we have. All of our other ones are either aquatic or semi-aquatic. And they prefer habitats that are, range from woodlands to open fields, and can be in urban and suburban areas as well. So they're not just occurring in these rural country areas. They can be found in your backyard. They can be found in parks in downtown Martinsburg. They really are generalist animals, and they can be found in a lot of different areas. They're long-lived. So a lot of times when people hear about a box turtle, the first thing they, I can't even tell you, most people I talk to, the first thing they say is, I hear they can live up to 100. And I'm like, yes, they can. And actually, the oldest individual on record lived to be 130 years old. But on average, they're typically living about 25 to 30 years in the wild. Usually when we start to see them getting up to over 100, those are animals that are in captivity. But fun story for you, in 2019, I had a graduate student that was working out of West Virginia University, and he was on a private landowner's property doing a turtle project for us, and happened upon a box turtle. And when he picked it up and looked at the bottom of it, on its plastron, engraved into its plastron, or the bottom part of the shell, engraved into the plastron were the numbers 1926. And this was in 2019. And I should note really quick, please do not engrave things into the shells of turtles. We do not want that happening. You also would need a permit to do that. Just please don't do it. It's not good. But 1926. And so he actually communicated with the landowner, and the landowner had been living on that property for generations, like that. It had been in their family for generations. And he had known that his great grandfather had actually marked turtles that way. And he would mark it with the year. So that 1926 was accurate. And that turtle was found in 2019. That animal is living in West Virginia, just living its best turtle life, hanging out, and it was healthy and doing everything that it wanted to do.
They continue to grow.
They don't. They'll stop at a certain size for the most part. I do have, so they were talking about Scoot, their box turtle. I also have a box turtle that likes to travel around with me, and his name is Franklin. But this is about the size they get. I will say we have found males that have been a little bit larger than this, but this individual is about average size that we see in West Virginia. This guy I'll talk about a little bit more as to how I got him when we get into the threats and we talk about the illegal trade. But something else to talk about with them being long-lived, box turtles also take a long time to reach sexual maturity. So it usually, at least for a turtle, when we think about small animals like this, usually in ecology, the premise is that when they're smaller, usually they reach sexual maturity earlier so that they're able to breed quickly, because usually they're food for other things. And so they need to try to breed quickly. But for box turtles and for other turtles and reptiles in general, they actually have maturity is reached at about, at least for box turtles, between 10 to 15 years of age. So it actually takes them quite some time to get there. And we'll talk about the importance of that in how threats really can impact populations.
How do you age?
So we can age the turtle we can get a ballpark estimate age of the turtle using the plastron scutes. They lay down about one new ring. It's almost like counting the rings of a tree. And I can show you on Franklin here. He actually has them worn down pretty well because he's an older animal. He's a grandpa. But you can actually, if you looked pretty closely, you can actually see he has very clear indents that go around and around. And so they call those annuli, which they also call them that in trees. And you can count those to try and get at an age. Now, that's been kind of shown that it's not 100% accurate, but it's the best we have, and it's a standard way of us doing it. So it gives us somewhat of an idea of how old they are. But I wanted to put in here that they have slow reproduction, and part of that has to do with delayed maturation, right, between 10 and 15 years old. And females only lay one clutch of eggs a year, and that is about 2 to 7 eggs annually that they'll put into a hole. And I'm sure many of you have seen a box turtle nesting or have seen females go in. I get phone calls every year, I have a turtle that's nesting in my flower bed. They're in my mulch and they're nesting. Happens all the time. But they'll go to these areas, they'll nest, and then that'll be it for the year. So it becomes really problematic for them. We'll talk about it a little bit more when we talk about the threats, but the fact that it takes 10 to 15 years for them to get to sexual reproduction, once they do, they're only reproducing once, and it's only 2 to 7 eggs. Because their nest success is not high. It is not uncommon for those eggs to get dug up and eaten by, raccoons, possum, dogs, skunks, other things. It's not uncommon for them to get eaten by insects that are underneath the ground there. It's not uncommon in areas where there is a lot of invasive plants for the roots to actually grow through the eggs and destroy the eggs. So, there are a lot of things that can destroy a nest. So it's really difficult to get to a point where the nest actually hatches. And then once you do hatch and you're a baby box turtle that's the size of about a quarter, you look like a really tasty snack. And you get eaten very, very easily. And so they have very low survivorship of getting from hatchling up to being 10 to 15 years old when they reach sexual maturity. And so, it's not that kind of, we would expect that they're going to lay a bunch of eggs and hope for the best. When you think of things like mice, they are reproducing rapidly to try and hope that one of their offspring is going to make it to sexual maturity so that they can actually replace their mother, essentially, in the population, to make sure that there's a sustainable population of those animals. For box turtles, and for other reptiles, their whole strategy is they need adults to stay on the landscape. They need to be old. They need to get old, because that means that female has had so many chances to try and get at least one of her offspring to being sexually mature and being able to replace her in the population. So it's really important.
Do females return to the same nesting site?
They will generally stay around in the same area, yes. As long as they don't get disturbed while they're nesting. They are very sensitive to that.
Is sexually viable all the way up?
That's a great question. I would expect if they got to like age 100, possibly not, but I don't know. Usually we don't see animals dying or like living past when that happens. Usually if they're in the wild, they die before them because they've been depredated or some other thing has happened to them. But I would expect that the older they get, the harder it is for, at least once they get over a certain age, that it gets harder for them to be able to reproduce.
Still not, that was spring, I found a fairly large box turtle that had been torn apart. I assumed it might be fox, but the coyotes, it might be large enough to do that.
Coyotes, foxes, as I said, raccoons, skunks, possums, all of them are capable of ripping a turtle open.
Adult turtle?
Yeah, it depends on how badly they wanted it, and also if there were any wounds on the turtle beforehand, before it got ripped up, that would have allowed for them to actually get a hold and rip it open. I know that that sounds terrible to talk about. I don't want to think about ripping open turtles, um, but so we talked about all that, and that's really important for you to understand, especially when we start talking about the threats, because the threats are what are really problematic with trying to maintain sustainable populations of box turtles. But I do want to talk about really quick is the distribution of box turtles. And as you can see over here on the top, you can see that there is a distribution in the eastern United States. And as I said before, the eastern box turtle has now been split into 4 different subspecies. And so when you say eastern box turtle, you're including all of these animals as well. So that's the woodland box turtle, which is what we have here in West Virginia. And you can see it's the most wide ranging. The Florida box turtle, which occurs down in the Florida, peninsular Florida area. The Gulf Coast box turtle, which is occurring up in the panhandle of Florida over into Alabama and Louisiana. And then the 3-toed box turtle, which you see also has a fairly wide range, out further west than what we have for the woodland box turtle. But as I stated before, here in West Virginia, we only have the woodland box turtle. So that's what you see right here. And they have been documented in every single county at this point. And we actually have museum vouchered specimens of from every single county at this point. And we'll talk about that more later, thanks to a project that we just completed a couple of years ago that helped us get there. So this is just showing you the distribution. And these are all points that we have gotten locations of box turtles across West Virginia. So why do we care about box turtles? Okay. And I'm sure a lot of you are hearing me say that and you're just like, because box turtles are amazing. They're cute. They're just wonderful creatures. And really that is it, right? They are so charismatic. Everybody loves box turtles. Like, who does not like a box turtle? Like, it really takes a special person, I gotta say. But they, because of being so charismatic, it's nice because they are sentinels of ecosystem health. Because everybody is out looking for box turtles. Everyone takes notice to when they see a box turtle because everyone loves to see one. And because of that, they get a lot of attention. And because they get a lot of attention, people start to notice when things are happening to them before you start to notice that things are starting to happen to other things. So, for example, they show signs of disease outbreaks. I can't even tell you, and we'll talk about the disease here shortly when we talk about threats, but rhinovirus in particular is a disease that really is devastating to amphibian populations. But most people aren't going and looking into every pool they see to look and see if there are a bunch of dead tadpoles in there. Like, that's not something that a lot of people are doing. But if you start noticing that there's a bunch of dead box turtles on your property, or a bunch of box turtles that have really swollen, puffy eyes, or just look really sickly, we're going to get a phone call about it. I'm going to get a phone call about it. And we do. And so they just really tip us off to something else that's going on in the environment. And the same holds true for environmental pollutants. And I can't even tell you how many people call me about this. And you can see even in this turtle here, abscesses that are growing on the side of the head. How many people in here have actually seen a box turtle that has an abscess growing? There's just like a lump growing on the side of them. So we have a couple people. Those are actually generally start to grow in the tympanic region of the turtle because of exposure to some kind of pesticide is usually what ends up happening.
You talked about that, and you talked about virus earlier. This one, and I've got a bunch of turtles in my property. When I find things like that, it's really tricky to find assistance, find someone that can help. I mean, I know about the ear infections and all that.
Yeah.
Do we have resources to reach out to?
No, unfortunately, we don't. In West Virginia, and I'm gonna try to not go too far down that path. But in West Virginia, we do not have a reptile rehabilitation. It's just not something we have. We don't do wildlife rehab in the state of West Virginia. There are some bird rehabilitation centers, but those are the only ones that are operating, and they only take birds. So unfortunately, no. But I will say too, some of this stuff is stuff that is occurring naturally, right? Death is a natural part of life and nature. So that's going to happen occasionally. And if we do see something dying, we do want to know about it. If we see a bunch of them dying, one box turtle that is, not looking great is not necessarily cause for alarm. But if you end up finding, we had one site in particular where there were 20 animals that were found that were dead and dying. 20. That is a huge number of turtles, and that is a huge impact on a local population. That we would like to know about. If you're seeing that kind of thing happening, you're seeing like several turtles in one area at the same time having the same kind of symptoms, we would like to know about that for sure. But yeah, and so they really are sentinels for the ecosystem. They really tell us what's going on. But honestly, I think one of the biggest things about box turtles that makes them so important is that they are important ambassadors of environmental literacy. I can pretty much guarantee that every single person in here has had some interaction with a box turtle and seeing it, and they probably had it at a very young age, and it probably really was a very positive, good experience and really connected them to nature. And box turtles do a great job of doing that because kids love seeing box turtles, right? And it really is so cool to see one, and it connects them to nature, and it allows us that gateway to getting them hooked on nature. So we want to make sure that box turtles are persisting on the landscape so that future generations are able to also have that gateway into loving nature and respecting nature. But as I said, there's a ton of threats out there impacting box turtles. And historically, box turtles used to probably be okay with dealing with those threats, because it wasn't too extreme. But you have things like habitat fragmentation and loss that are taking place. And we see this happening over here in the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia, where we're starting to see more and more development. And with more and more development means more and more people. And with more and more people, that also means we need more roads. And as we make more roads, we start to fragment the habitat even more. And roads are crazy detrimental to turtles and to box turtles. So road mortality, huge thing. And you might go, why are roads so detrimental to turtles? And I'm sure many of you have seen a box turtle crossing a road when you've been driving. But why is that turtle crossing the road? Well, the turtle's crossing the road because it's also trying to, fulfill some portion of its life history, right? It's trying to go to a nesting site or an area to go and get food or water. But there's other things that are going on. Turtles, like other reptiles, are ectothermic, right? They require the outside temperature to regulate what's happening inside their body. They're not like you and I who can, go and eat a Snickers bar and then your body does its thing to make sure you're staying that nice 97 to 98 degrees at all times. Box turtles need to move and bask and basically position themselves to be able to elevate their body so that they can metabolize things properly. Okay? And what better spot than a road? Roads are typically free of a canopy, so it's open, there's sun exposure. Roads are typically made with dark coloration, right? So they hold heat, they attract heat. So why not go and bask on a road? You're going to get your temperature up real quick. It makes it really easy for them. That's one reason why box turtles get attracted to roads. That's one reason why you see a lot of snakes on roads and things, because they're coming out to try and bask on it because it will elevate their temperature quickly, especially in the morning is when you end up seeing it a lot. But why else are road mortality such a problem? Well, because when you're digging out a road, a lot of times there's a lot of loose soil and gravel that's left on the sides of the road. And to female turtles, that looks like great nesting habitat. So they go and they try to nest there. And what happens when you nest there? Well, either A, your eggs don't hatch because all sorts of crap is going over into the side of the road that is contaminating that nest. Someone's driving over there, so it's compacting the soil, making it so that the, hatchlings can't even get out, or the hatchlings do get out and they're getting run over by cars. Also, what else could be happening at the side of the road? What do roads do? Roads also attract mesopredators like possums, raccoons, skunks. They're all coming to the roads because we're hitting things and there's free and easy meals there. People are throwing things out the side of their car. because they don't want their French fries anymore. And it's attracting these animals here that are then also finding those tasty snacks of little baby turtles that are coming out, or they're finding that nest on the side of the road and they're able to eat those. So roads are really problematic, okay? And as we also start to have more development and more people, you start to see increase in populations of raccoons and possums and skunks because there's food available. People are feeding cats, right? There's a bunch of cat food out there. That's really easy for a possum or a raccoon to go and eat. Bird food that's being left out all summer long, right? That's something that they can go and eat pretty easily. And when they all get concentrated in those areas, it also, they are able to find these turtle nests a lot easier, okay? Disease. Rhinovirus, mycoplasma. Rhinovirus is more of an amphibian disease, but can impact box turtles. That's what you see up here. It causes that puffy eye, causes them to have swollen necks. And what ends up happening is that these box turtles are going to vernal pools where you end up having these tadpoles that are getting rhinovirus. And when the rhinovirus viral load is high enough, it kills off the tadpoles. Well, those dead tadpoles look pretty delicious to a box turtle who then consumes it and now has just been inoculated with a viral load that is capable of taking them out from rhinovirus as well. So it becomes really problematic. And even more with this habitat fragmentation, why it's problematic is that the more fragmentation you have, the more pollutants and other stressors are going into that vernal pool, which causes the immune suppression of those tadpoles, which means they're more susceptible to rhinovirus. So it all comes back to, you know, this habitat fragmentation and habitat loss issue. Mycoplasma is just basically a turtle's cold, upper respiratory infection disease, and that can knock them out because it can suffocate them, essentially. But what I really am going to focus on for the next little bit, and something that is a huge issue for box turtles and a huge issue for box turtles here in West Virginia, is the illegal collection and pet trade. And people collecting box turtles to either have here domestically or to ship overseas for the pet trade over there. And there is high demand for box turtles and other turtles in general, but for box turtles in particular. And so I'm going to start off by just giving you guys a little bit about the illegal wildlife trade, okay? So I'm going to go back really quick. A bunch of you probably read that slide already, but I want to ask, when you hear the illegal wildlife trade, not judging by the fact that I'm talking about box turtles right now, what's the first thing that you think of? Just curious. Snakes, elephants, rhinos, tigers, right? We're thinking about, a lot of times we think about those large charismatic megafauna that gets shoved down our throat. The ivory trade, right? Rhino horns, bear spleens, big cat pelts, shark fins. We're thinking about those big things. But what people don't realize is that turtles and reptiles actually make up about the same percentage of the wildlife trade as those mammals that we're talking about, that everybody focuses on. And the wildlife trade is a $20 billion a year industry. It ranks up there on the same level with other illicit activities like the drug trade, counterfeiting, guns, and human trafficking. It literally falls right in line with all of them because the wildlife trade is a huge deal that is very much brushed under the rug because these are also very scary, right? But why is the wildlife trade, why is it so popular? It's because the cost of doing business is really low. If you get caught with some turtles, what's going to happen to you? You might get a $25,000 fine. That to us sounds like, oh, God, that's a lot of money. No, it's not. When you see how much you're getting for one of these turtles, that's nothing. That's just drop in the bucket. And so the reward is very high. And the likelihood of you getting caught is even smaller. Because think about how many, let's talk about West Virginia for a minute. How many natural resource police officers do we have out on the landscape? per county? Can anybody tell me?
Two.
2? 1. Most of our counties have 1 natural resource police officer, and they have to deal with all natural resources. So that's deer poaching, that's bear poaching, ginseng poaching. There's a lot of other things that go on. People riding ATVs on our WMAs, lots of things, right? Checking hunter licenses to make sure you have your hunting license, your fishing license. So it's really difficult to get caught, right? But when you do, you then get slapped with like maybe a $25,000 fine. I guess if you had a lot of turtles, you might get slapped with like a $200,000 fine, but that's still like nothing. But as I said, reptiles are one of the most commonly traded things. And this is just to showcase what these animals are going for. So in Hong Kong right now, musk turtle, we have those here in West Virginia, $31 a turtle, okay? Painted turtles, they're the most common turtle we have in West Virginia. You can't drive by a pond without finding a painted turtle in it. You get $39 a pop on that. I could go throw a hoop net in one of these ponds and I could guarantee you I would catch about 100 painted turtles. All I have to do is just find somebody to ship them on over to Hong Kong and I'm going to have myself a lot of money real quick. But then you kind of go down this list. Look at the snapping turtle, $662. That's one animal. That's one animal. Spotted turtle, $681. Eastern box turtle, $764 on average. You're getting for one animal, one. Do you know how easy it is for me to drive up and down the road on a rainy night and find box turtles just walking along the road, or during a rainy day, should I say, in like May or June, and find a bunch of box turtles? And you know what? People do that in West Virginia all the time, and they ship them overseas because you're making $764 a turtle. And wood turtles, which you guys got to see the lovely Willow. Willow was also a turtle that was confiscated and was stolen, and we got her back. She was actually confiscated in New York, and she genetically linked back to our populations. They came to us and stole that turtle and took her to New York. And she now resides and is an ambassador with PBOS, and she's living her best wood turtle life now, being a great ambassador. But look at that. That's almost $1,400 for one turtle. And then you look at our prices here in the United States. This is domestically. This is what people are paying for here in the US. You're still having people that are paying $360 for a box turtle. So as I said, high reward. High reward. And people know this. And I'm not trying to recruit you all into poaching. Please know that now. We actually have 300 officers per county. But I just want to showcase some of these reports that are coming out. So Florida man gets prison for capturing, selling wood turtles. This was from West Virginia. This individual took 140 wood turtles from one of our streams. 140 wood turtles. You want to know how many we got back? 17. Because he had already shipped the rest of them all overseas. 140 wood turtles from West Virginia. He's stealing that from all of our citizens because those turtles belong to us, right? They're West Virginians. They're supposed to be here. Nope, they're overseas somewhere in someone's aquarium. No, not necessarily. When they hibernate, they'll hibernate in communal areas sometimes, but they don't necessarily live in colonies. But I just want to also showcase that it's not just turtles. Rattlesnakes are huge in the pet trade as well and in getting illegally collected. And this is another West Virginia man with 17 rattlesnakes that they took right off the Monongahela National Forest. Here's more about those rattlesnakes. This was a man in Florida that had over 1,000 turtles. Many of those were box turtles. And guess what? There was a West Virginia wood turtle mixed into that as well that we got back. Here's an individual who took a bunch of salamanders. 200 box turtles that were seized in South Carolina. Here's 300 more box turtles that were seized in Pennsylvania. Here's even more box turtles. Here's a man in Ravenswood, West Virginia, 300 box turtles. They're not turtle hoarders.
No,
They're collecting and selling. Yes. And here, this is the most recent thing that I have. This is just from right across the border over there in Virginia. This individual got $13,000 fine for selling box turtles as well. I don't remember. It says 27 occasions of selling box turtles, but this is just one individual here, one individual there. And you want to know where they pop up? On Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. Do you know how many animals I've gotten off of Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace that we get from with using undercover cops to go and get them? So many, because people are selling them all the time. So this is happening. And just as another example for box turtles, just this past year, I got a phone call because there was a mechanic out in Martinsburg. Gentleman stopped his car because his car was breaking down. And they started working on it, and they started hearing scratching in the trunk of his car, opened it up, and sure enough, there were 300 box turtles in the trunk of that guy's car. And they knew well enough to call us. Unfortunately, they couldn't hold that guy there, and he drove off into Pennsylvania with those 300 box turtles. But at least we were able to tip off the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they caught him trying to ship those out of Pennsylvania. 300 box turtles. That individual said he was literally giving people $10 to give him a box turtle because he knew how much money he was about to get out of it. So he was paying people in West Virginia to go and collect box turtles for them. And they were literally just driving along the road and picking up box turtles as they saw them crossing the road. Many of them came from the Kanawha State Forest. So it happens a lot. Every year we get box turtles. Our friend Franklin here, this guy came to me this year from Martinsburg. He was in the basement of someone's house when they were getting raided for drugs. The police department found him just wandering around in the basement. This animal, you can tell just from how many scars and things he has, that he was a wild animal that somebody found, caught it, and was like, I'm going to keep this as a pet now. It's a huge problem. It's a really big problem. And it happens all the time. And now I'm going to give you a little bit more information about why it's such a problem. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But this is just a really fun figure that was published in a Canadian journal. So please understand why there's a moose there, okay? We don't have moose here. But this is just showcasing to you how it's different for like some things, because some people are like, well, why is it a big deal if like you have one box turtle? Why is that a problem? Well, here's the problem, okay? You have some game species here. We have a white-tailed deer, we have a bear, and we have a snapping turtle. We're going to use a snapping turtle in this example. This is year 0. These animals are all non-reproductive animals. So we're going to assume that these animals start off non-reproductive. We're only having one, okay? Deer becomes sexually reproductive after 1 year. And by year 2, we now have a fawn, okay? And this is clearly not here in West Virginia because usually we're getting 2 fawns, all right? But look at this bear. We're still waiting. We're still waiting. It takes all the way to year 5 before it reaches sexual maturity. 5 years for that bear. And then it finally has 2 cubs. But let's take a look over at the snapping turtle, shall we? And by 5 years, we're still not there. It isn't until 17 years that we have that turtle lay its first clutch of eggs. 17 years that animal has to live on the landscape with all of the threats we just talked about, hoping that it makes it to being able to lay a clutch of eggs, okay? Lays a clutch of eggs. And let's hope that those eggs hatch. And then let's hope that those babies actually make it through all those threats to be able to reproduce. That's a difficult feat. But in that same 17-year period, we now have 25 bears added and 912 deer, okay? These animals reproduce quickly, and so it's sustainable for us to take one here and there. That's sustainable. It is not sustainable to be taking a turtle off the landscape. It just is not. It simply is not. And here is more to showcase that. So this is a spotted turtle population in Maryland. So not even that far away. This population had been studied for a very long time. And so they were able to do what's known as a population viability analysis of the data that they had collected, which just means that we know demographic data about the population enough that we can project what's going to happen with that population over time. So you see here that if we were to not change anything and not just let that population continue to exist, no management, no nothing, we're seeing a declining trend as it is. It's slow, okay, but it's declining. Over here, this is what happens if you take just one animal every year, and this is looking at it from roadkill. If one animal gets hit by a car each year, doesn't matter if it's a male or female, one adult animal gets hit by a car each year, that's what happens to that population. We don't have a population anymore. It's gone. It becomes extirpated. Confound this with people trying to take them. Confound that with all of the other threats that are anthropomorphic threats being added onto these turtles. We have a real problem. And we have a real crisis on our hands because these populations can crash quickly. And that's why it's important to keep them wild, keep them outside, okay? So what have we learned so far? Have I scared you yet? That's the real question. Have I just destroyed your soul? Just kidding. We've learned that box turtles are long-lived and have delayed reproduction. Okay. We've learned that they're widely distributed across the eastern US with the woodland subspecies here in West Virginia. And we've learned that there are many threats that can cause major impacts to populations, including that the illegal trade is a major, major threat that is seldom discussed. How many people before you came in here knew that illegal collection of turtles was that bad? Like, be honest, you knew it was that bad. Okay. Most people, it's like, I knew that people collected turtles, but I didn't realize that like they're collecting with 300 at a time. And those are just the people we caught, right? Like how many people are out there doing things that we haven't caught yet? I'm sure more, because we don't catch all of them. I can tell you that. Okay. So you're probably just sitting there scratching your head like, what is West Virginia DNR doing about this? Right? There's got to be something we're doing, right? And that's the end of the discussion because we do nothing. I'm just kidding. Well, we love our box turtles in West Virginia. And so we have pumped a lot of time, energy, and money into box turtle conservation initiatives. All right. And so I'm going to try, I don't even know what time it is. How am I bad?
7.
Oh God, I'm gonna have to just rush through all of this. I'm very sorry. But we're gonna try to go through these really quickly. But here's just a sample of what we've been doing, okay? We had a citizen science project. Many of you probably heard about the box turtle citizen science project we ran for a couple of years back during 2020 and 2021, which gave us information on the distribution of box turtles in West Virginia, the current status and state rank of box turtles in West Virginia, and also allowed us to develop a road interactions hotspot map, which I'll show you in just a minute. We've started to go into long-term monitoring and looking at population structures across the state of West Virginia. We've actually been one of the first states to initiate repatriation, which means that we take animals that have been confiscated from the illegal trade and we put them back out on the landscape. And we've been tracking them. I'm going to talk about that. We have a license plate. I saw someone had it when I pulled into the parking lot. We worked real hard on getting that license plate out there. But we have a license plate to help with getting conservation funding for box turtles and other non-game species here in West Virginia. And we also updated our amphibian and reptile regulations here in West Virginia to help us in combating the illegal trade. And so I'm going to talk about the Citizen Science Project. I'm going to try to go through this quickly, and I'm sorry if it's going a little too fast, but I will answer a bunch of questions at the end. Okay.
People can leave whenever you want.
Okay. So the background is that we need accurate spatial distributions estimates to be able to come up with conservation strategies for animals. And box turtles have always been thought to be across contiguous or ubiquitous, should I say, across West Virginia. But nobody had actually ever looked at that. Nobody had actually done any research to determine where do box turtles occur in West Virginia. And so we decided that we were going to use a citizen science design to basically ask the public to report their box turtle sightings so that we could get a better understanding of how the species is distributed across West Virginia. And we were going to calculate what is known as an extent of occurrence and an area of occupancy. And both of these methods are used for delineating species distribution. And they're also really critical for us to be able to understand the status of the species in the state. So the EOO, or the extent of occurrence, is the area contained within the shortest contiguous imaginary boundary. Instead of sitting here reading this, I'm just going to show you this. So this is what we think of with the extent of occurrence. So it incorporates every single observation that we had, whereas the area of occupancy is, okay, within that extent of occurrence, where are they actually occurring? Does that make sense? And as I said, we wanted to use a citizen science framework to do this. This allows for public participation in research and the scientific process, which helps us to promote conservation and ecological literacy. It allows individuals to connect to their resource. And I can't even tell you how many people I've talked to that when I tell them the different products that have come from this data that they collected, it really means something to them, that they put forth their time to do this and they see results coming out of it. It connects them to their resource, and it allows us to collect a large amount of data and makes a huge, robust data set that I myself would never have been able to collect on my own. So I'm able to ask you all to help me in doing that. And you guys delivered, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It is not, but I'll explain that in a minute why that's not the case. We do know that citizen science data is spatially biased, right? So it's where the public can actually access, right? So a lot of times we get a lot of information from like public lands, state parks, county parks, PVOS preserves, right? Because people can actually access those locations. But like if I was on some remote area on the Monongahela National Forest that doesn't have a trail going to it, you probably have not been there because it's not really easily accessible to you. So we did have to correct for that when we were doing our analyses, but that's more just a caveat to throw in there that we did do a lot of corrections as well. And with citizen science, there's also ID concerns. But the nice thing about box turtles is that everyone knows what a box turtle looks like. So these were our goals and our objectives with the project. We wanted to design an online reporting form for people to be able to do. And we did. We created I'll talk about it in a minute, but we created a mobile app and everything for people to report the animals. We wanted to calculate that EOO and AOO for West Virginia. We wanted to determine box turtle phenology. So when are they coming out of hibernation or brumation? And when are they going into hibernation? When are they most likely to be moving? We wanted to know that and how that differed regionally across the state of West Virginia. And we wanted to identify possible hotspots of box turtle road crossings and or mortality so that we could start to focus on those to try and potentially stop that from happening or at least reduce it. And so what we did for addressing that, designing the program, we used our GIS Survey 123 and made an application so that you would be able to use your cellular phone to report when you saw the animals. And it used your phone's internal GPS to tell us where you saw that animal at. You also could submit a photograph of that animal to us so that we would be able to also verify what you were looking at. And I should say, we also collected whether or not the animals were seen on the road. So one of the questions, if any of you, how many of you guys participated in the Citizen Science Project? A few people. So like when you were answering it, one of the questions that came up was, was this turtle seen on the road? If you hit yes, it was like, was it seen dead on the road? You could say yes or no. And that helped us in being able to create that hotspot map later on. So for the EOO and AOO, this is just talking about, I will tell you now, I just took our presentations I've given at scientific conferences. So I'm going to try to like make this a little bit more relatable to you all. So there's a little bit more in this for why, and that's why it's the way it is. But what we did is we took legitimate occurrences. So these are animals that we had a photograph that we were able to say, yes, that's a box turtle. And we took those and used those to help us in developing where the EOO and AOO were in the state. And as a result, as I said, when I said that you all delivered, we had almost 8,800 observations submitted over a 2-year period. That's a lot. That's a lot. When we did our timber rattlesnake project that was similar to this, we had 450 and we were like, oh my God, that's so many. 8,000. Okay. And I do attribute a lot of this to the COVID pandemic, okay? Because people are like, I have to stay inside, but I can go out into the woods and I'm going to go look for a turtle because I have nothing else better to do. But that's okay. But of those 8,726 observations, notice that 92.3% came from the public, okay? So that is thanks to the public that we were able to get those numbers. All right. 6,000 of those were legitimate observations, and they occurred in all 55 counties in West Virginia. And thanks to that, we were able to get a nice publication out there that now documents that we have box turtles in every single county here in West Virginia. We did have a couple of mis IDs, and that's okay. They were not very common, but we did have some snapping turtles, painted turtles, wood turtles, which were really cool to see, river cooters, and northern red-bellied cooters that were reported as well, stating they were box turtles. It just gave us an opportunity to give a little bit of education out there. And here's just how it looked, right? So the yellow are the legitimate observations. So those are the ones that we had a photograph that's like, yep, that's a box turtle. And just showing how they were distributed across the landscape in West Virginia. The red are the unverified ones. So they just came in, they did not have a photo. But just so that you can see, most of those unverified records are falling right within areas that we had verified records. So it leads us to believe that a lot of those unverified records are probably good records for box turtles. But one thing you might be noticing is there is a bit of a blank right in there, and I talk about that here in a minute. But here's some of the photos that we got, which have just been great. And, you know, I was a little biased. This is my kid here. But just showcasing the difference in the patterns that you see in the shells. Like, look at this one, it's like pure yellow almost. But then you have some of these that are more striped. We had people finding them while they were going hunting. I can't even tell you how many people were like, I was out turkey hunting and I found this turtle. People were walking their dogs and their dogs were coming up to them with turtles. You know, we learned that people like to feed turtles, and we're like, stop doing that. But we did find people like to feed turtles. We got turtles nesting over here, turtles on roads, turtles doing all sorts. This nice rainbow with the turtle walking underneath. People got real artsy. And it was great. You could tell people had a lot of fun with this. Okay. But we got so many records, and I don't know if you could tell, but this kid here, we contacted his parent to ask it for permission to use this photo because he's wearing a Ninja Turtle. What is this? Turtle Power on his shirt. Really? Staged it, I know it, but it's wonderful. I love it. So looking at the EOO and the AOO, this is just showcasing that basically what this is saying is all of West Virginia is basically occupied by box turtles. The highest elevation that we got a legitimate observation was 1,239 meters, which is pretty high. Not as high as like Spruce Knob, but not too shabby. And funny thing, we've actually now gotten more records that have been up higher than that. So we expect that to go up. One of the things we were talking about is that we'll do this again in like a few years down the road to see if climate change is causing us to get higher and higher elevation turtles. But we did get 2 new county records, which was Brooks County and Marion County. And we added the museum voucher specimens for Barber, Taylor, and Wood. And when I say that, I don't mean that we pickled a turtle. They now collect photo voucher specimens. So no pickled turtle and all that. But this is just showing you how the extent of occurrence came out in the area of occupancy. You can see it cuts off a little bit down here in the southern portion, but that mostly is due to lack of folks going and actually looking in those areas. So it just tells me where I need to go and focus my attention in trying to locate those. And this is just really interesting in regards to the elevation. So this is an elevational map. So those white areas are our highest elevations in the state. So you can see that Allegheny front is really, really just separating our turtle population, which is not a bad thing, but that really is driving. That's why you're seeing that space there. Okay, it's because it's just too high.
There's a void in the south of Jefferson County.
Yeah. That's a great question. I don't know why. I don't know if that's because that also kind of falls into Berkeley County a little bit. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure why that we have that void there, because I know they're there. Who wants to go out and find them? But yeah, there is a strange void there.
all those photos, did you notice any like pattern differences from like west to east?
We did not. So we did not see that there was like anything in regards to that. But one thing that we did do is a lot of those photos are probably going to be shared with some folks at Patuxent. Well, I guess it's now not considered Patuxent Wildlife Research Refuge. It's now the Eastern Ecological something or other. It's gotten merged over with the Leetown Science Center. But there's an individual there who has started using AI to be able to identify turtles by their markings. And we're hoping to have him run through our photos to see if any of the turtles that were reported were actually the same turtle. So that'll be coming at some point.
I have a question from Casey on Zoom.
Sure.
Is the boy from agriculture?
It's possible. It could be from agriculture. It could also be from development. So those are areas that have a lot of development taking place, but those are both very, very reasonable purpose or reasons for why we don't have them there. It's certainly not because we don't have people there to look for them. That's for sure. Got a lot of people there. Nope. Genetics, all genetics. So yeah, really interesting stuff. And this is just showcasing where we got new records from. And now talking about the phenology. So these are the 4 ecoregions that we have here in West Virginia. We have the Blue Ridge, which is right over here. We have the Ridge and Valley, which is what we're in over here in the Eastern Panhandle. You have the Central Alps, and then you have the Allegheny Plateau. And what you can see in regard to the phenology, when we started actually getting records and when they trailed off, you can see there's not really a difference, which is shocking. Because a lot of people would be like, yeah, here in the Central Alps where it's like higher elevation, it's colder temperatures, they're definitely going to be coming out later and they're going to be going in earlier. Yeah, that did not show up. We did not see that. So we see that across West Virginia, we're having, and this is 2020 and 2021, and we're seeing very similar patterns. But you will see that we are having peaks that are taking place in basically your April, May timeframe and right around June. And then you're seeing another blip right here in mid-August to September, where we're starting to see movement again. This is nesting. Right here, that June timeframe when people are seeing them, that's nesting. That's females that are moving to nests and people are seeing them more frequently because they're moving, trying to find nests. This right here is when they're first coming out of hibernation and they're starting to try to get their bearings after coming out from being underground. And this over here is them going back to hibernation. That's why we're seeing them. Which one over here? Back into hibernation is around October into November. So right around now, we're going to start seeing them head that way, especially with the cooling temperatures. We've seen a lot cooler temperatures this October than we did last October.
The number of observations are higher to the west than you go to the east, they're lower.
We did. We had more observations over in the west than we did in the east.
Education.
Possibly, it also could just be because of the number of public lands. There's more opportunity for people to actually get out onto public lands and find them. And then the last thing is the road interactions hotspots map, which I wanted to showcase this because this is really cool. And this is something that we were able to do. So basically using all those records, we were able to create what's known as a habitat suitability model, which basically predicts the suitability of habitat across the state of West Virginia based on those presence points that we had that everyone submitted. And using that and also the data that we collected from where people were seeing them on the roads, we were able to use data that the DOH collects about the roads. So it tells us what type of road is it? Is it a 3-lane highway, a 1-lane highway? Is it gravel? Is it dirt? What type? Is it a country road? Is it a state highway? Is it, you know, how much traffic is going on that road? We used all of that into this model, and we were able to predict at a 30-meter stretch the likelihood that a turtle would cross that 30-meter stretch of road for the every road that is tracked by the state of West Virginia by the DOH. So you can see here where you see those red lines, that means there's a high likelihood that a turtle is going to cross that road or interact with that road in some way. And what's really cool about this, and so you're seeing it on a broad scale, so you can't really zoom in really closely to see how they can look at it and be like, okay, this 30-meter spot is very likely to have it, but the next 30-meter spot is not as likely. How can they use this? And we've shared this with DOH. We've talked with the DOH. They can use this to help them in planning. We just got a whole bunch of money from the infrastructure bill. A lot of that money, or money that was ear tagged in that, was to do wildlife crossings. They can use this to help them prioritize wildlife crossings because they now know where the wildlife crossings need to go. They can use this when they have to repair a road. Should we put in some fencing here to try to exclude turtles from getting up onto the road? They are going to be able to use this to make informed decisions to try and reduce that road mortality impact. This is really cool. And this is something that most states do not have. So it is really neat. And it is all thanks to the public turning out and submitting all of those observations. That's something that is direct conservation that is taking place thanks to the public helping. I'm getting chills just thinking about it. It's so cool. All right, so we talked about, I've talked about all of this. We did document though with this illegal activities that are taking place and also just some like, we need to pay attention to this. People painting turtles. People paint them because they're like, oh, I can tell who they are later on. But did you know that those scutes, that's like skin, okay? So they actually need to be able to like air and respire through that. And I shouldn't say respire, but they need to be able to have gas exchange through the scutes and through their shell. And by doing this, that takes that away from them being able to do that. It also makes it that they can't thermoregulate properly. So this is a problem that needs to be dealt with. And we're going to be trying to do more outreach to say, don't paint turtles, okay? Another thing, people just placing them in water. Box turtles, although they do like water, this is not their habitat or environment. They will occasionally go to the water to be like, you know, they go on vacay, right? And they're like, I'm going to go and hang out at the lake for the week. And then I'm going to, but no, I'm just kidding. But they don't occur just in the water all the time. So they're placing them in situations that aren't great. These animals over here, these are 12 turtles that this was somebody ratting out their neighbor. Okay, they were like, my neighbor has a whole bunch of box turtles that shouldn't have. And this individual in particular, when we did go and we busted them, we got all those turtles. But, which you actually have been seeing a bunch of photos of these turtles throughout the presentation. But these turtles, the guy went on vacation, and when he would go on vacation, he'd pick up a turtle. That was like a souvenir to him. He'd pick up a box turtle and bring it back. So we had like a bunch of turtles from all over the place that we have no idea exactly where they came from. But that he was kind of hoarding in his backyard. It was actually in the back of an abandoned house. So he was jumping the fence and tending to these turtles. So another thing that we're doing, moving on to another project, long-term monitoring across the state to try and get at population structure. As part of the Eastern Box Turtle Working Group, we developed a population assessment protocol, and we've been following that here in West Virginia. You can see here we have a 28-meter radius circular plot, and we searched this for turtles in here. You can see this wonderful photo was taken by Laurel. So thank you, Laurel. But this is us also being able to incorporate partners in this process. So, and we've partnered with so many different individuals, and especially those that have young individuals that are trying to up and coming into the natural resource field to train them on things that we do to study wildlife and to make informed decisions. And so this is just showcasing where we have monitoring going on right now that is established. Over here in Jefferson County, we've partnered with Shepherd University, and they've been actually working at the NCTC and been monitoring box turtles over there. PVOS, thank you, Laurel, has been monitoring some box turtles for us over in this area. You can see the West Virginia DNR is monitoring box turtles right in these areas. University of Charleston is monitoring box turtles down in the Canal State Forest. Marshall University down there right outside of Huntington. West Virginia University up there outside of Morgantown. And then MACHAC is a herpetology group that actually services the eastern and mid-Atlantic region of the US. They've been monitoring some WMAs over in this portion of West Virginia. So partnerships, this is so important for us to be able to understand population structures across the entire landscape of West Virginia. All right, so the next thing is repatriation. I'm sorry, I know I'm like way over time, but we're gonna keep going. So this is so cool because this is something that, you know, everybody talked about it, right? Because this illegal turtle trade is a huge issue, and we get these confiscations and we end up having thousands of turtles on hand. And here in West Virginia, we don't have zoos, right? There aren't AZA facilities. We have the Good Zoo all the way out in Wheeling, but it's small and it can't take on a large number of turtles. And every year West Virginia DNR is confiscating reptiles, and in particular, box turtles. We get box turtles all the time. You want to know where they go? My office. It's terrible. Can't even tell you. I had rattlesnakes in my office because there's nowhere else for them to go. And I can tell you now, I may know how to deal with herps on the landscape. I know nothing about herps in captivity. So I am not the best person to have them. But we need to come up with like, what are we going to do with these animals? Because of what a lot of time is happening is that people go, oh, they could have disease. Oh, we don't know about the genetics of it. So they euthanize them. And that's what has been happening. And we have to, we can't do that, right? Like, how are we telling people don't take them, but then we're going to euthanize them if we confiscate them from you? That doesn't jive well with us. So we decided we were going to try repatriation. This is something that there's always been whispers of it, like, oh, maybe we should try putting them back out there. And everyone's like, no, that's too risky. Well, here in West Virginia, we decided to go rogue. Okay, we put them back out. But we had animals that had been part of a confiscation. This is just talking about how we needed to come up with a better way of dealing with these confiscations because we don't have places to put them. A lot of other states have zoos, aquaria, that they can go and hand those animals over to. And those individuals can definitely deal with that many animals. They're trained to do it. They have the facilities to do it. They have the infrastructure to do it. We do not have that in West Virginia. We just don't. So we needed to develop better outcome possibilities for our animals to improve PR, right? Public relations as a whole, because I'm sure you guys don't like hearing, we're killing all the turtles that we get. Well, we don't, just letting you know that. Law enforcement morale. Do you know how sad it makes a resource officer when he goes out there to take a turtle and then you tell him, okay, we're going to euthanize it now? He's like, why did I take this from somebody? And then also overall conservation of box turtles. And so we had 6 box turtles that were at the Ogle Bay Good Zoo that we had gotten from 2016 confiscation. They were taken from West Virginia, and actually most of them probably were bred in captivity from animals that were poached from West Virginia. That's kind of interesting to know in all of this. We disease screened them at that time, found that they didn't have disease issues. We got 2 other box turtles in 2021 that were surrendered by a landlord because he went into his tenant's apartment and there were just 2 box turtles crawling around. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And then it's like, yeah, that actually happened like 4 times that year in different apartments across the state. I didn't realize how crazy common that was, but it is. But they were 2 males. So we ended up getting 2 more animals. We were able to disease screen them, made sure that they weren't having any disease. We held those animals in captivity for 6+ months in individual aquaria so we could observe them, make sure they weren't showing signs of disease. And they were all maintained at our DNR office in Elkins. And after all of that, we had chosen the Fox Forest WMA, which is out in Elkins, which is a high elevation area. So we're already putting them into a kind of dicey situation, but we knew that there were box turtles at this location because we had already been studying them there. We had a long-term monitoring plot at this location. So we already kind of knew that the densities were low. Also, because of work we had been doing with ranavirus and looking at ranavirus prevalence across the state, we knew that ranavirus was already there. So if I were to release a turtle that might have had ranavirus and was asymptomatic for it, I would have been releasing it into an environment that already had ranavirus. I already knew it was there. So it wasn't as dangerous of an act to do. And so we made these soft enclosures, these soft release enclosures, so that they could get acclimated to being outside. So we went and we put them outside in May of 2022. And by June 2022, we released them. We put radio transmitters on them so we could track them daily, or I should say weekly, and follow them around, see how they were doing. And we found that we put 2 turtles in each one of these pens. So we have 4 pens. You can see how they're spaced across that WMA. And we placed them in suitable habitat when we placed them out there. And basically the reason we kept them out there for a month too was to get used to the local neighborhood, okay? They got to meet Mr. Raccoon, a possum, a wild box turtle came to greet them one day. This person's dog that was off leash. Deer, lots and lots of deer. Lots and lots of deer. But we released them and we started tracking them. And what did we see? We were collecting behavior and general health data on these animals. We were collecting climate data to determine why they were doing what they were doing. So we were looking at ambient temperature, wind speeds, relative humidity. We were tracking their mass every time we found them so we could determine whether or not they were losing weight, which was getting us an understanding of how are they as overall health. Then obviously the location. We did have one animal die. After he left the pen, we found him, he was dead a couple of weeks later, and we sent him off for diagnostics at the University of Georgia. And it came back that he had a bacterial infection. It was very sad. But what was really cool is that after the first year, every single other turtle made it into hibernation, which that was what everybody had told us. They were like, there's no way. They've been out of the wild for so long, they're not going to know what to do. We took these animals that had never been this high in elevation, have never dealt with a severe winter, okay? We put them out on the landscape. Some of those turtles were born in captivity, had never been in the wild before. And they had never been overwintered because we were not overwintering them. They weren't overwintered at the good zoo. They were kept up and alert throughout the winter. They found places, I always like to call it my Ian Malcolm, life finds a way, right? Jurassic Park, right? They figured out what they needed to do. They went, we had wild turtles that we also were transmitted and tracking as well. When the wild turtles went down, our box turtles took about a month after them to be like, oh God, it's cold. I got to go down. But the wild turtles went and buried themselves under the soil. Most people don't realize that. Box turtles burrow underground when they're overwintering. Our turtles burrowed underground. They'd never done that before, but they figured that out. I have to go underground. It's the only place got to go. So we went underground. And what was really cool is we had one turtle that I was tracking, and I kept finding that I kept getting the beep. And I was like, it's got to be here, but I don't see it here. All I see is this rotten stump and this dirt. And I'm looking, I'm like, oh, the transmitter must have fallen off. We're looking, we're digging under the soil. We're like, oh, maybe it is under the soil. We're digging, and I can't find it. I'm like, this thing, the transmitter has to be here. Like, it had to have dropped the transmitter. No, 6 inches underground. We found its shell, and it was sleeping in it. And you wouldn't have even known that it burrowed itself under there. There was no evidence of it. It figured it out. It's exciting. That's the radio transmitter. Yes. It's epoxy. Yep. So it's just incredible because we were told that wouldn't happen. They wouldn't be able to figure that out. Well, guess what? They figured it out. Did we find a couple turtles that were out crawling around and there's snow on the ground? We sure did. But did they end up finding a place to go and overwinter? And what's even more exciting is they made it through the winter. Every single one of them came out this summer or this spring. Every single one of them. So they can do it. They can figure it out. So the ones that we know that had never done it before were the ones that were born in captivity. They had never been outside before. When we confiscate them, we get information from people, and they told us that they had poached animals before and had bred them in captivity. So we knew that some of them were confiscated, but there have been, and what's even crazier is that 2 of the animals too also had deformed shells. They couldn't close the shell the whole way. The back, it couldn't close the whole way. And those animals still made it. So even though they had a shell malformation, they still were able to make it. So just really cool data that we're getting there. You can just see how crazy their movements are all over the place. They do. As soon as you drop them, like, you know, there's that everyone talks about, you can't move a turtle, right? You can't move it because if you move it, it's so in tune with its home range, it's just dead. Well, that's not technically true. I'm not telling you move turtles. Do not move turtles. Leave the turtles where they are, but they will figure it out. It took these turtles, and especially this one, it took him a long time. He moved around a lot. And you know what? We're still tracking them to this day. He's still moving around a lot. He still hasn't figured out exactly where he wants to settle yet. So they're still trying to figure that out, but they are figuring it out. They are being able to overwinter. They are interacting with other turtles that are wild turtles on this property. we're gonna deem this a success.
I feel like I read something about roaming tails. Like there are certain turtles that just roam.
There's but box turtles for the most part don't just roam. I mean, some of them will, but most of them are gonna hunker down and figure out where their home range is.
Can you give me an idea of maybe it's up there, but how big is that area that the one that roamed a lot? What are we talking about?
So this is all hectares here. So our one that roamed was 102 hectares.
Wow.
Wow. And that's over the course of summer. So you can see, but a lot of them were pretty, like our females, they had pretty.
I don't know what
I'm not gonna lie to you, I can't like visualize
Is
that.
it like 200 acres or is it like a?
I can't give you an acre. There you go. I was gonna say, I can't help you on that one, unfortunately, but luckily I can phone a friend right here. But you can see here, our females actually didn't move much. They were just like, we released them and they were like, I'm good.
Age-old question about finding a turtle on the road, where to move him to.
Don't move him anywhere but the other side of the road.
That's what I mean. Should you, I've been told to pick it up carefully by the shell and move it in the direction it was.
Correct. Yep.
Is that still the best?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll talk about that in a minute. Down here. I'm sorry, we're going way overboard. 2.5 acres. 1 hectare, 2.5 acres. So that's so just talking about our wild turtle. This is our wild turtle that we had moving around as well. I'm just gonna go through this, but there's our turtle coming out in the spring. He made it, yay, successes. So we do know that they're capable of doing this. We're gonna continue to study it, but it is a viable option. And you best believe we are already in the process of figuring out what we're gonna do when we get animals in the future about how we're gonna be able to repatriate them rather than having them meet a demise. Because I can tell you now, most of our partners are tapped out on box turtles because we get so many box turtle confiscations that I can't call, PBOS anymore and be like, can you take another turtle? Because they're like, no, no, we got too many. This is just talking about the update to the herp regs that we just recently did. Just as an FYI, we're going to go through this really quickly, but it is now not lawful to have possession of pretty much every native amphibian or reptile in the state of West Virginia. There is a very short list of animals that you can have. Box turtles are not allowed to be in your possession. There was a grandfather period that we were actually very generous on and allowed for over a year for you to get your verification forms and everything in order to get that grandfather letter. That has now expired. And so at this point, nobody is allowed to be having a box turtle in their possession without having a permit. And a permit would mean a scientific collection permit, so you're doing it for research or a study. And this is just talking about why do we need the regulations? Maintain the populations. We talked about this before with people stealing things. That's why we need this. But let's jump to how can you help? Because this is probably the big thing that you guys all wanted to take away. You're talking about box turtles on roads. Personal safety, first and foremost. Do not just jump out into oncoming traffic to save a turtle. I know it's really tempting to do so, but please make sure that you're being safe when you're doing it. But you want to move the turtle in the direction it was heading. So you want to move this turtle over this way. And I cannot stress this enough. Do not move the turtle to a new location. I can't tell you how many people go, but I looked at this area that I was moving to and it looked really bad. No, it knows where it's going. And I think the best thing I've ever seen was a YouTube video where there was this person and they were dressed up as an old lady trying to cross the road to get to a nursing home on the other side, or to get just to like a bingo hall or something on the other side. And the person saw them trying to cross the road and was like, oh, you're not where you're supposed to be. Threw her in the back of the trunk, drove her down the road, and then just like threw her out on the side of the road at a nursing home and was like, bye. And she was like, where am I? That's literally what you're doing. Just leave them there. They know what they're doing. It might seem crazy to you. Why are you going into this cornfield? That's not where you want to be. That turtle knows better about what it wants to, where it wants to be than you know about that turtle. So just let the turtle be. It might look crazy. Just move it to the other side of the road. Just move it to the other side of the road. Leave it alone. All right. This is a big one. Report suspicious activity. You see someone doing something that looks weird, call us. Okay. This is the number that you can call for the whole state. And you can also report it on Facebook if you're like me and you're a millennial and you're like, I don't do phone calls. No, thank you. You can go online and you can report it that way. And for you here in the Eastern Panhandle, you can also call our district office in Romney, and we can dispatch an officer to come and check out any suspicious activity that's taking place. And what should you be looking for with suspicious activity? You might be like, well, what do I look for? Generally, they're going after protected areas because that's where all the turtles are. Okay, so and also it's where it's accessible. They can get there. So state parks are really popular, local parks, public areas. And I say public areas because I think about those PVOS preserves all the time. They're kind of secluded, right? Not a ton of traffic. It wouldn't be hard for someone to pull in there and just walk out into one of those fields and take a couple turtles. Nobody would even know. So those are the types of areas that we typically see people frequenting when they are going and they're illegally collecting. They also carry things like bags and nets and snake hooks. They'll drive slow on the road at dawn and dusk. And after rain events, they're just driving really slow. You usually see a lot of upticks in activity right near a reptile expo that's about to take place. People come from all over the place and they start looking for animals that they can sell. Vanity plates, right? Things that say perps or snake man or terrapin that you see up here. Turpin, should I say, that you see up there. Those vanity plates are something that a lot of people that are collecting animals illegally use. They like to hide under the guise that they're doing good things, but they're not. As I said, presence of collection equipment, freshly flipped debris. This is something I see all the time on the Monongahela National Forest, is I see logs and stuff that are turned over. And maybe they're not collecting stuff, but they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, looking for animals. Individuals walking or riding with bags or sticks, vehicles parked in high-risk areas, okay? And then rental vehicles and out-of-state tags. I'm not telling you to go and be like, every time you see something, Oklahoma, what you doing here? Okay, but that should be something to tip you off.
And then I have a question from Nicole Oxenrider.
Who is she? Tell her no.
Kevin, the neighbor needs a question for him. How can kids help box turtles? Also, he says, hi, Dad.
Go to bed. I'm just teasing. No. So kids can help box turtles by leaving box turtles outside and in the wild so that they can continue to live their best box turtle lives and other people can enjoy them and enjoy the same experience that you're getting. And we're going to talk about here in a minute about ways that you can create box turtle habitat on your property. And that would be something too that kids could help in that process as well. Also, if kids see suspicious activity, I guess they could tell an adult. And a big thing that kids can do is tell your friends. Don't take box turtles home, because I can't even tell you how many times this kid that is asking me these questions right now has told me that their friend has a box turtle at home. And then they're like, Daddy, do we have to arrest them? Yes, no, Daddy doesn't have that power, okay? But no. But we should be spreading the word that box turtles and other wildlife in general needs to stay outside so that they can continue to serve their ecosystem function and that other people can enjoy them too. But another thing is, for those of you that have lots of property, especially those of you that have fields and things like that, or meadows, mowing. People hit box turtles with mowers all the time. And agriculture is also a big, perpetrator of this too, is hitting them. So here are just a couple of things that you can do to try and reduce the number of casualties and animals that you're hitting during the year. If you restrict your mowing to being between November 1st and March 31st, that misses the entire active season for box turtles. And so you don't have to worry about hitting one that's using the field. That's not always possible for people, okay? So if that's the case, mowing should be restricted to mid-July and mid-August, because this is the time when turtles are estivating, or when they are trying to basically escape the hot climate, and they're just trying to conserve as much energy as they can so that then they can make it into hibernation, okay? So they're not moving around. They're not going to be as likely to get hit by your mower. Leave 5 meters or 15 feet of unmowed edge. So that way there is an area for the animals to escape into. Mow every 2 to 3 years rather than mowing every year. And if you have to mow every year, just mow small portions. Avoid mowers with heavy guide bars that roll along the ground because those are picking up turtles and just smashing them as they're going along. Raise those mower blades 7 inches. And that's even for people in residential areas. If you have a wooded residential area that you're mowing, turtles come into your yard. If your yard has long grass, 7-inch blade. Keep your mower blade off so you're not hitting them. Because I can't tell you how many people call me and go, I hit a box turtle with my mower. And you know what? As we talked about earlier, there's no rehab centers here. So you hit one with a mower, that thing's gonna have to try and live its life now with that happening to it. And that's really unfortunate. So try to do that and mow at a slow pace. Go slow. So the turtles, have a chance to get out, mow from the middle of the field outward so they can escape. They can sense the vibrations of the mower. They're going to try to get out of there, give them opportunity. But helping them at home, create brush piles and compost piles. Box turtles love compost piles. They get nice and warm, okay, as the composting is taking place, and they can burrow into it. And you want to know what else comes to those? Worms. You want to know what else comes to those? Other bugs, grubs, things like that. And you're throwing your tomatoes and your watermelon scraps and everything, and it's just a smorgasbord. It's like Golden Corral for box turtles, okay? They love compost piles, so make them accessible if you have them, and then brush piles like you see here, because they love to burrow into those to estivate when it's really hot, and then also to overwinter. Leave the leaves. People have been probably telling you this for all sorts of things, whether it's salamanders or bugs or it's bats, but leave the leaves for box turtles too, because again, they're using that to try and hide during their estivation time and also when they're overwintering. And those leaves are allowing there to be things like bugs and other foraging items. It also makes the ground more moist, which means that we have more mushrooms and things, which box turtles love to eat as well. So allowing that. Planting fruiting plants like berries. Box turtles love berries. Not this one. He's weird. But box turtles typically really love strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, wine berries. I'm not telling you to plant wine berries. Please don't do that. They're invasive. Don't do that. But if you have them and you can control them, box turtles do like to reduce disturbance around nests, mulch piles, flower beds, and gravel. They love those things to nest in. And if you see a turtle nesting there, leave it alone. Don't try to get up and get a bunch of really cool photos and stuff, because they can get really easily disturbed, and then she'll sometimes stop doing it. Now, also realize that not every time a female makes a nest, she lays an egg. Sometimes she makes a nest and then she goes, no, didn't feel right, and goes somewhere else. So don't feel too discouraged if you saw a nest get built and then you never see any eggs or hatchlings, or you just see a hole that never got covered up and you're like, there's no eggs in there. Did they get eaten? No, she just decided, I'm going to try somewhere else. And if you do, you can protect the nest if you do see one laying eggs. I'm not suggesting you have to do this, but you can do it where you can take some chicken wire and just kind of put it on the ground using some stakes just to try and protect it. If nothing else, this is more to be a visual so that you don't accidentally mow over it or anything like that too. So it gives you a visual of where that nest is to reduce. And then lastly, buy a box turtle license plate. Promote box turtle conservation by donating money to the DNR to be able to do programs like what we're doing right now. All this research, all of this great work that we're doing to protect box turtles. You can get a box turtle license plate to do that. See, I told you I was going to go way over, but questions, oh God, so many. Okay. All right, right here.
Do you have an example of what a box turtle nest might look like?
Honestly, yeah, so you'd see a little bit of disturbance. So typically the hole is about this big. They're very small holes, but usually, she's going to cover that up. She's going to typically cover that up and then try to flatten it out. And she might use her plastron even to flatten it out after she's kick the dirt back on it. A lot of times people witness the turtle actually nesting, and that's how we know that they have a nest. It's very rare that I have someone call and be like, I have a box turtle nest. And I'm like, okay, how do you know? Oh, I just know. most people are not going to be able to just like eyeball a box. I can't even tell you that if I was walking through the woods, I'd look like, that's a box turtle nest. You know, I'm not going to be able to do that. But if a female is actively nesting, which people see all the time in their gardens, flower beds, along the side of their driveway, you see that's going on and you want to try to protect it, you can certainly do that.
Question from Amy.
Okay.
Yeah, she said, when should you remove the netting or wire mesh from a nest that you covered?
Sure. So typically we end up having them hatch in late August and September. However, I will say that box turtles do tend to overwinter in the nest. So babies will actually hatch in the nest and stay in the nest over the winter and then emerge in the spring. So honestly, I would say you could remove it in like September, you know, but also if you see babies crawling around in there, remove it. But you know, I would say by the end of August, September, you probably should move it.
So is the box turtle actually digging her own hole, or she finds like a mouse hole or a chipmunk hole and expands on that?
She's digging her own hole. Yeah, mama works hard. So it'll take her, I mean, it could take her a couple hours to sit there and like actually, and when she starts laying, she goes into a trance almost. So like a lot of times, so we say don't disturb them because if you break that trance, it's really problematic. Like that, it's really stressful for that poor turtle. But when they're in that trance, a lot of things can happen to that turtle and it would not phase her because she's basically just like focused on just releasing those eggs. But you'll see her just start to kick away things. I like how I'm sitting here like, you know, but sorry, very animated person. But yeah, so she could be there for a couple of hours, few hours. She can be there for a while.
Are the eggs round, oblong?
Yeah, they're usually oblongish.
Like a flaxseed egg.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And usually sandy soil, sandy-ish, loose soil. That's why they like to go for mulch mounds, very loose soil, gravel, very loose. And if you have any kind of sandy patches, they're going to go for that too.
They're starting to dig underground now.
They are.
How deep do they get?
So it depends. We had some turtles in our study. Now, granted, we were tracking our repatriated turtles. But some of them, like I could walk up and see their shell still poking out. I've had that happen where I've been hiking during the winter and I've seen a box turtle shell like just popping out from just underneath. So, I mean, they don't always have to go extremely deep, but we did have a turtle that went 6 inches underground, which is, that's a good distance underground.
They're omnivores, I assume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they'll eat. Yeah, this one's just a meat eater, and the one that bit me now only eats people.
Those small ones, when they're young, they're mostly feeding on-
They're mostly feeding on insects and things like that. Yeah, the young are.
When they are gonna hibernate, do they always go underground or will they go just under leaves?
They might go under a pile of leaves. We had one that used an already created hole in the ground that it went into. One of our turtles, a tree tip up that had fallen over, it just went into like the root hole. Like she went down in there.
That they dig their own.
They will also dig their own like underground as well, but they will use some things that are already excavated if it's there. We had one that was under moss. Like she just like crawled up underneath the moss and just was underneath a moss hummock. And that was it.
Can I thank you real quick?
Sure.
Because you told me some of this a long time ago, and in my observations around our property, we said leave the leaves, and we have a place where I push all the leaves, and that's where all the hatchlings were this year.
Mhm.
We had 6
They
hatchlings
all go.
in there. And the brush piles. I have a landscaping company. I encourage my customers not to burn their brush piles. No burn piles. Put it in the woods where it can be habitat for these guys because they find them and they gravitate towards them.
I can't tell you when we're doing and again, I'm not trying to tell you how to go and find turtles to take and sell. But when we're doing our monitoring, most of the time when I find a turtle, it's along a log, like a down tree. They really gravitate towards that structure. It's, what's wrong?
What do they take?
I mean, typically they can get around it. It's off the ground enough and they can just kind of get around, get under it. But I just think that they really like that structure. It gives them some form of protection. They feel protected by it. I don't know. They really do gravitate towards it. Depends on when you put the brush pile there to begin with. Because if you put the brush pile there in like the middle of the summer and gave an opportunity for a bunch of turtles to like crawl underneath it, you could then burn it while there's a bunch of turtles already there. I think you'd be okay. Yeah.
Funny thing we observed, we've had a female, I guess we now know it's a female box turtle that's in her backyard, and we've seen her periodically. This spring, a male found her and mounted her, and she pulled in, and there was like nothing, and he was like, hey, you know,
Yep.
he was like hanging over the edge, like maybe calling to her or something. He gave up, and
Happens a
started to
lot.
walk away, and then she like peeked out, and he came back. And I think he tried like 3 times, and then
Persistent.
abandoned it. You know, it was like,
They can't catch a hint, right?
you know, it's like, oh,
They're not so different from us, really. No, but we were actually having that conversation before, is that a lot of times when females are receptive, so female box turtles can store sperm. So they are able to store sperm, in particular, like over winter and stuff like that. You know, when females, a lot of times I hear people say, I saw them mating. And it's like, did you see them mating or did you see them courting? Because there's a big difference, because a lot of times the female is like, no, thank you. And the male is like, I'm going to sit up here for a little bit
Yeah.
and see if you will give me a green light. And she's just like, get off, like, you know, and that's exactly what you were seeing, which is poor females. Yeah. And yes. Yeah. And you'll see the cloacas actually like intertwined and everything like that. And yeah, that happens. But you definitely see a lot of, and the courtships can be quite aggressive looking, where like the male is like biting at her and stuff like that. You know, he really is such a Casanova. I'm just going to bite your face. It's all good. Don't you like that? No. No, I don't. So. Yeah, they should. That's a great question. I don't know if there have been studies showing that males have gone to try and mate with non-reproductive females, like, or, you know, young animals that have not reached sexual maturity. I would imagine that that does happen. We see males, you know, they get so like driven to go and mate, they'll just start mounting all sorts of things. So it wouldn't shock me that if a juvenile happened to be in the way, it would probably, I mean, it would end in the same way as like the female, where she just like closes all the way up and she's like, I'm just gonna wait this one out. But as I said, it's not too different than us. But it, yeah, it wouldn't shock me if those kinds of attempts happened, but weren't successful, obviously.
How many years would it take for a turtle, a box turtle, to become full size?
Full size.
Well,
I think that that's going to depend on the environment as a whole. So are they able to get the resources they need to be able to grow to that size? So if you have high densities of animals, which means it might be harder for them to get food or whatever, it's possible they won't grow to their full potential till later in life.
I've never seen a box turtle smaller than 6 inches.
So a lot of that has to do too with your ability to detect them, to see them. So like hatchlings are really hard to see because they're so little. So people don't see a lot of them because they're so small. But not only that, but like we were talking about before, juvenile survivorship and hatchling survivorship is so dismally low that you don't see a lot of young animals, because that's not how the population structure naturally is for turtles. For turtles, you have a lot of adults and few juveniles. because they just don't have a lot that are surviving to get to adulthood. But that's why it's so important for the adults to stay on the landscape.
So what's done with sea turtles is they've collected the eggs
Yes.
and hatched them
Yes.
and raised them to the point where they're past that super vulnerable
Yeah.
phase. And then, so is that like a, if money meant nothing, we would have a program like that?
So that's called head starting. And for box turtles, not yet. I don't think we're at a point where at least West Virginia would be like, we're going to do that with box turtles, but we are already in the process of discussing that for like wood turtles, spotted turtles, doing head starting programs here in West Virginia. And that does happen for wood turtles and spotted turtles and bog turtles, which are federally listed, and even box turtles in the Northeast, like further in the Northeast where they're even more rare than they are here. West Virginia actually has fairly good numbers of box turtles comparatively to the rest of the Northeast. We are kind of a stronghold. We're recognized as a stronghold here in West Virginia. We have a lot of contiguous habitat. You look at West Virginia, we're 78% forested. That is not what you're seeing in other states. So we actually have probably the bulk, and we have one of the largest responsibilities for keeping box turtles like, you know, here and on the landscape, because we have strongholds for them here. And because of that citizen science project, I didn't discuss this, but because again, from the public, West Virginia has the largest database of box turtle occurrences, period, for box turtles, period, in the nation. That's all because of the public.
Is that your idea?
It was a group idea. It was a group effort. It was a group effort. I could not have collected that much data on box turtles. I could not. The public would think.
For the fingerprint, so to speak, of the turtles, when you're taking a picture, is it preferred straight up from the top?
Straight down onto the carapace. Yeah, it'd be ideal.
I have a question from Zoom from Christy. Is there data for how many males and females in a clutch? Is it 50-50 or temperature related like alligators?
Temperature related. So they actually deal with temperature dependent sex determination as well. So the temperature of the nest dictates how the sexes will delineate during embryonic development. And so what you end up typically seeing is that the warmer it is, the more females you have, and the cooler it is, the more males you get. Which that's a huge thing right now because of climate change. And so there is this discussion as to how is that going to impact populations moving forward if we start having higher gender ratios or skews in the gender ratio towards females with higher temperatures. Most of our turtles are that way. Wood turtles are not. Wood turtles are one species that they are not temperature dependent.
How would it go for wanting to go about starting some kind of kickstart program with doing, you know, the Head Start and doing?
So rehabilitation is something that is way beyond me because that is regulations and things that don't allow people to have animals in their possession. AZA accreditation, we actually just worked with the AZA to be able to enroll. There's a program called SAFE, and I can't remember what the acronym is, like Saving Animal. I can't remember the acronym, but it is North American Turtles, and the whole point of it is to try and take confiscated animals and place them in AZA facilities. We actually worked with the AZA to get a facility now here in West Virginia. We actually are partnering with West Liberty University that has a zoo-side program on their campus, and also with the Good Zoo to be able to start doing that head starting. Actually, earlier this week, they got a bunch of spotted turtles in that came that were given to them from a confiscation. So that is a project that we are actively working on. The DNR is actively working with partners to get them involved in such programs. It would be hard as long if they aren't an AZA facility. So an AZA facilities are typically going to be either zoo and aquaria, or in the case of West Liberty, they have a zoo science program that is AZA accredited. So that's a great question. So the question is that does the facility have to be in West Virginia? And the answer is maybe. So there's a lot that goes into it because you can't just move animals across state boundaries. That's a Lacey Act violation, a federal violation. So there has to be a lot of coordination between the states to be like, we're moving a bunch of our turtles over to you. That said, West Virginia also wants to be able to do things in-house. Like we want to do things in-state. If we can keep them in-state, we want to keep them in-state.
So that was rented car from Oklahoma that got caught with 300
That's why the Fish and Wildlife Service stepped in, because that was a federal offense at that point. So he got busted with, correct. So that like that wood turtle case we were talking about, we knew that individual actually was staying in a hotel right across the street from the Romney office, which is great. That's where all of our law enforcement are. That was a great idea. So we actually knew that they had those turtles at the time and we were staking them out. And basically we were there with Fish and Wildlife Service watching because we knew they were going to drive across state boundaries with those turtles. So now rather than just being a slap on the wrist state like infraction, like, oh, you need to give us a little bit of money because you had some turtles you weren't supposed to in the state of West Virginia, it now became a federal crime what he just did.
But then the confiscated turtles can't be returned to West Virginia.
They can, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, and they were. What we were able to get, we got back. Fostering can't happen because you can't have them in your possession.
Well, if you're a licensed fosterers, would you take a couple?
I am not addressing any of those questions. That's above my pay grade.
State park.
So we are working with state parks as well as our wildlife management areas as potential areas for release. So a lot of information has to go into determining where we can release them. Because obviously we don't want to release animals into an area that already has our carrying capacity. So if you can't, you should not be adding, like, for example, when we get to like what the fire code might in here be like 300 people, you wouldn't want someone to be like, well, I'm going to come and dump another 100 people in here after there's already 300 people. Right. But it's really important for us to understand habitat at the site, how that habitat's being used, and the density of turtles that are already there so that we can make the decision of how many can we put there and is that a good fit for those turtles to be put there. That's why these long-term monitoring spots that we have are so important because all of those are on public lands in some fashion. And so it really helps us in understanding that whole density aspect. We also have information from the Citizen Science Project where we know there are higher density of animals in certain parks, just based on people sending us how often are people interacting with turtles in those parks. So yeah, there's just a lot that goes into making those decisions. It's not just a snap decision. We don't just go, we have turtles, we're going to throw them outside. There's a lot that goes back into that. But we are working through that process. We're hoping to set up little sites that's like, this will be a site, like we already have it like in our hip pocket. We know this is a site that we're going to do it. We know this is a site where we're going to do it, kind of thing.
And away from where people are.
Correct. Right. We don't want people to just go and take them again. Exactly. So, all right. I'm sorry that I went almost an hour over. Thank you. My office is based out of Romney, but I am statewide. So I oversee all of the herps from the state.